Here is a metaphor for grief. Grief is like the ocean. It comes on emotional waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is swim. I know thousands of people are keeping up with the updates about the Nolan Wells tragedy, and there have been some new updates and a strong possibility that there is now evidence that Nolan Wells was murdered. And I'm really, what we got to stop doing is calling the people who were with him friends, because they were not his friends and they never were. And so in this episode, I just want to talk about some lessons from the grave. And I'm a teacher by profession. Some of you know that. But also, I think just in general, we need to learn that whenever we see a situation like this, we need to try to find the lessons. The lessons so that the living may not experience the same things in the future. This tragedy is it's heartbreaking for some of us, especially for people who are parents. I'm a parent. I'm also an auntie. I'm an educator, and to know that a young person who had so much potential, to know that his life was just cut short senselessly is just painful. There's no other word to use. It's painful. It's excruciatingly painful. So we're going to talk about some lessons throughout the episode. We're going to make it very short. I want to give a few life lessons that just came from, to me. I'm just going to speak from my heart. You wouldn't believe this, but I actually had done an entire episode with a guest earlier today, and I don't know what it is. Every time I do an episode now, the sound quality is so bad, I can't use it. The last time I had a guest, it was the same way. Her voice weaved in and out. Same thing here. And this was a really good episode. So I'm just hurt that I can't get my technology to work over here. I'm a low tech person, but I have got to do something because there's some really great people I would like to introduce you to. So let's get right into this. This is going to be titled Lessons from the Grave: What the Nolan Wells Tragedy Can Teach Us. Here's another quote about grief. We do not have to rely on memories to recapture the spirit of those we have loved and lost. They live within our souls in some perfect sanctuary which even death cannot destroy. This situation with Nolan Wells has been difficult, especially for people who have children like I do. I'm also an educator, so I have many children that were born from my heart. I'm an auntie. I'm a humanitarian, so I just care in general. And to know that this young man was possibly brutally beaten and his body was discarded like he was trash is heart wrenching. There are new details that have come out, and it looks like, according to some reports, that Nolan Wells was alive and well on July 4th and made it back to land after the so-called party. And he ended up at some people's homes, and I'm not going to call them friends. I need to do a whole episode on what real friendship is, because people keep using the term friend and it is being misused, because they were not his friends and they never were. It seems as if when he got to shore and the party continued, there was some kind of altercation, some kind of fight, and Nolan was hurt. He was beaten, possibly to death. And rather than someone call the police and report this, they did a major cover up. And that's what's extremely difficult to handle, the evil that it takes to collude and to conspire together to cover up the brutality of this situation is not shocking, because they have a long history of doing this, but it is so disheartening still. We will never be immune to that. They've been doing this for hundreds of years, and they will continue to do this for hundreds more. I pray that, I know I'm an educator, so I often use life as a classroom. And when situations like this happen, we're hurting, we're emotional, we're just going through a myriad of feelings. But I hope that we will understand that we must learn, that those of us who are left on this earth, that I pray that some lives will be saved as a result of Nolan Wells's loss, that many more young men. And you know what's happened since this situation, Nolan Wells situation, has come out by being the only one in the group. There are so many other stories. Now I was going to do a whole episode on this because I can tell you, I watch the news and I live with my eyes wide open. And I remember other cases prior to this where a person was the only one, usually a male, the only one, and they ended up dead. This happens over and over again if we don't wake up. And this is the thing about science. Social scientists have learned that human behavior is predictable. And you know what you have to use to determine what a person is going to do in the future is what they have already done in the past. It is not that humans can't change, because we have the capability and capacity to change and be better and evolve and grow. But the reason why it doesn't happen is because it involves so much work. It involves time. It involves effort. It involves being honest. It involves pain to get better. And most people are not willing to go through all of that. So what happens? They remain the same, and they continue to do the same things, and they continue to teach their children directly and indirectly what they have done. And this is what when I watch some of the interviews with the people, the parents and some other people, what I realized, people forgot their history. When I look in the mirror, I see my skin, and I never forget that I'm a Black woman. Now, I don't walk around with thoughts of discrimination or racism in the front of my mind, but I can never forget that I'm Black. And I understand that because I am Black, it is a possibility that I can have a certain set of experiences just because of my race. I don't know how anyone forgot that. That's a life lesson. Don't forget that. And don't forget to teach your children that. And while there are good people and there are evil people in every single race, religion, ethnic group, culture, whatever you want to call it, there are good and bad people. There is a certain group. They have a long, well-recorded history of evil, of murder, of terrorism, of rape, of theft and brutality. And for the life of me, I don't get it. I don't understand how you can blot out that history. That's how you know what a person is going to do in the future. You must look at their past. And I'm just hurt. I'm just shocked. And this is what I try to do. I like the way Cat Williams said, and I mentioned this in another episode. Cat Williams said he was pro-Black but anti-racist. And I thought, wow, that was so well said. That's a perfect way of describing how I am. I am pro-Black, anti-racist. But I've never been able to forget my history. I have to interact with people of different ethnic groups and races and religions, and I want to do that now. However, I'm only going to do that on a professional level. I'm never going to get personal because of the history. I can't afford to take that chance. I can't afford to risk my life and members of my family's lives. And that's what is happening, and that's what keeps happening. I don't have the names in front of me. I want to say his name is Bakari Henderson. This is a situation that happened in 2018. I was going to do a whole podcast on this, But this happened in 2018, where this young man went to Greece he was the only one. He went with a group of people. Again, they're not friends, and they never will be, and they never were. How is it that they come back home? But he has to come back in a body bag. And over and over and over, there are so many stories like that, especially dealing with water, where people go out on so-called boating trips or fishing trips, and that person never makes it back to shore. It has to stop. Let Nolan Wells' life save future lives. You must teach your children. You must teach them now how to get along with everybody, have respect for all human beings, how to keep the truth in the forefront of their mind, but not let that stop them from having the best life they can possibly have. Again, we have to get along with people because we live in a world where we're going to interact with people. But you hanging out, and especially when there's drugs and there's alcohol involved, you increase your chances of being beaten to death. You know what's interesting? There was a young man, and I wish I had saved some of these links. He was on YouTube, or someone had posted him on YouTube, and he was telling us about a situation where he was invited to a party. The person who invited him, he thought he knew. But when he got to the party, there were people there that he didn't know. There was some kind of exchange. People were drinking. He didn't want to drink. Again, it's very similar to Nolan Wells' situation, where there was some kind of altercation. I think they tried to jump him, but to make a long story short, he got away. He got away to tell his story. But so many other people don't get away to tell their story. Please, 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 do not ever forget your history, because it's going to tell you what your future is going to be. Another quote about death. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Nolan Wells was loved. He was loved. And he loved. And we must remember that. Let that be a lesson, that we are to love. Now, we're not to trust, but we can love. You are guilty until proven innocent based on your history. You're always going to be guilty until proven innocent. We have to start to remember that, because we're going to keep losing lives. There are some other stories, again, circulating on social media. I only have Facebook. I'm old school, you guys. And so, but I use YouTube, and I can see that a lot of people are posting these tragic stories, and it will keep happening. And yes, you can be killed by your own people. I was in a little text group, and someone reminded me of the Shaquilla Robinson situation. And I guess they were saying, well, it happened this way, but it also happens where you can be killed by your own people. And that's absolutely true. But that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what's going on right now. And so we have to begin to teach that history, and teach it in a way where you are making your loved ones aware, not afraid, aware, so that they can protect themselves. Because if they had known their history, even if he had decided to go out with these people and he had known his history, the moment things heated up, he would not have gone back home. He would have tried to get in his car and go home. And maybe they tried to stop him. And I don't, and this is such a sensitive topic, because I don't know what the parents told him. And I don't know if they prepared for, like, if there's a situation like this, okay, what should you do? Like, I don't know what they told him, and maybe they didn't tell him anything. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem. And we got to wake up. If this doesn't wake you up, I don't know what can. I just don't know what can. Here's another quote about grief. Grief does not change you. It reveals you. It does not change you. It reveals who you are. It's how you respond. Now it is time for us to respond peacefully, and quietly by teaching our children their history, the painful parts, the good parts. And when we teach the history, this is what people are missing a lot of times, is they're missing to emphasize how we overcame. In my house, I never forget that if this were 1826 and not 2026, where I would be. I never forget that. There's a picture in my dining room, and every day I look at Harriet Tubman. Every single day. And this picture has her at different ages of her life. And she lived to be in her 90s. And I asked myself, how? Now, after all she endured, with no education, no resources, with everybody against her, with terrorism, with rape, with brutality, all the things she experienced, how did she make it? And I never forget what she used. I never forget her real GPS, her God positioning system. That's how she made it. And that's why she was able to do so much. And we got to get back to that. I'm not talking about religion. Religion has failed people. I'm talking about having a real, authentic relationship with the Most High God. When you're talking to God just like He's a friend. When you know that God is the one that made the sun and the one that made the moon and the stars and the planet is as real as the heat that you feel on your skin when you go out in the sun. You gotta have that relationship before there was a religion, before there were churches. We have a biblical example, Abraham, who built altars just so he could talk to God. He could have an intimate, sacred space. And we got to bring that back and let Him guide us, because Harriet Tubman could not read a book. And I don't know if she went to a church or if she could go to a church. But she believed, and we must believe, and He will tell us what to do and what not to do. And I am convinced there are certain people we are not to interact with on a personal basis. And I know that's strong. You got to work with them, collaborate to do good if you can. But it has to stop, because it's so many people are getting killed senselessly. It has to stop. You know what? Sometimes I try to understand things. That's just me. I just try to break it down. Okay, why does this keep happening? What's really the psychology behind it? Some of it is spiritual, because good and evil is real. It is a real spiritual warfare taking place every day. And if you're not aware of that, you can become a victim to darkness. And some people struggle with that darkness. They have a long history, again, of terrorism and rape and murder and all manner of evil. And so it is spiritual. But there's another thing, and I'm going to do a podcast on this, and it's how, and this has all been intentional, how stereotypes shape how people see you. And how people really see you is how they will treat you, what they believe about you. And I was thinking about how, if you're a person and you don't have to even be watching media necessarily, but just in general, we are inundated every single day, thousands of times, with images, negative images, destructive images of Black people, just over and over and over again. Everything is destructive. The image of us being intellectuals, being innovators, even though thousands of people exist who are intellectuals and innovators and creators and inventors and scientists, that part of us is not seen enough. So when they're dealing with us, they're treating us like the stereotype, because they don't believe we are just like them or we're better than them. They don't believe that. There's something else going on here. And I've been thinking about it, like, this keeps happening, and there's a reason why. Just like when you see people out in public, you got thousands of videos like this, people just minding their business. And you have these people from the other people, if they're people, if we can call them that, because some of this stuff is so inhumane. You wonder, how can I call this being a human? I don't know what this is, but nevertheless, The people just minding their business, and this keeps happening, and people just come over and terrorize them. And I'm like, what? What is it? There's something else, and we got to get to it, and we gotta come together and figure out what we can do to have better experiences, or the best way to respond, because we cannot change anybody else's behavior. We can only work on ourselves. I hope that's another lesson. I hope this brings us closer together. I hope that this brings us closer together. You know what's interesting? Since this incident, and I think this is intentional, I've noticed that I've seen a lot more videos of us fighting, of us killing each other, giving people CTE, because they're just beating them in the head and not understanding that later there's a grave consequence for that. And this is all intentional. It's all to get people to distract from what happened to Nolan, to say, okay, well, look at what you all are doing. And we got to be conscious of that. We have to be aware of the imagery that we could create, because we already have a well-known enemy. They have made, there are no secrets. They may try to hide their faces, but there's no secret. They hate us. And what you got to do is we got to start doing some things to deal with that, and build our community so that we can be safe. I just, again, I'm grieving myself. That's why I'm giving these quotes. Let me give another great quote. This is another good one. We never lose our loved ones. They accompany us. They don't disappear from our lives. We are merely in different rooms. And that was by Paulo Coelho. And I love that one. We never lose our loved ones. They're always with us. Let us remember the ancestors. Let us remember what they endured. Let us remember what they survived. That's why we're here. I marvel. We are here. You know, I've read a lot of books, and some of the books I cringe when I think about the sheer brutality. But I'm here. I'm sitting in my living room because they survived it. That nothing, no matter what evil they came up with, it did not stop us from living and continuing to live and grow and be creative and empower others. There's so many things that people from our community have created that has empowered the entire world, the entire universe. And we must never forget that. And we must teach that to our children. We must. And I'm sitting here because they survived. And that's what we got to teach, that kind of strength. We must teach that kind of strength. Another quote: death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss in life is what dies inside us while we live. We must let some things die, some bad things die. The lies that we tell ourselves. The things, and I get it, there's an ideal and there's what's real. In an ideal world, we should all be able to live together in peace and harmony. We should all see each other as God's children. We should all do what Dr. Martin Luther King said. We should judge a person by his or her character and not just their outer epidermis. Unfortunately, since we have been in this country, that has not changed, and it's never going to change. And once we accept that fact, we don't have to be bitter. We can be better. We can protect ourselves and our children so that we don't have to keep seeing these tragic stories. And that has also affected how we treat each other. You see, what I realized a long time ago, some people have internalized the hatred that was projected onto them. And that's why they want to get so far away from their own people. They don't understand that the factors that led us to be this way didn't start with us. Now, it can end with us, but it didn't start with us. We can solve this. We can heal, and we can grow, and we can be better. And I know it takes work, but we have to let this lesson from Nolan Wells, all the lessons from Nolan Wells' death change us for the better. Again, I have a child. I have a nephew, two nephews. I have a niece, and I think about their lives. They're growing up in a world where so many things are better, but then things are still the same. And if we don't get these lessons, it's just going to keep happening. Like I said, if you go right now, any social media platform, you go on YouTube, you can just go to the news. There is story after story after story that is coming out, and they have the same common denominators as the Nolan Wells story. The person was the only one, or the person was an extreme minority of maybe a few of them, and the person died tragically. How long will we continue to be, I don't know, is it naive? You can be historically naive. It is time to wake up and smell the coffee. Again, not to be bitter, but to be better. We gotta find, and this is something I learned years ago, you gotta find the treasure in the trouble. You gotta find the treasure in the tribulation. We've gotta figure out some things. What can we learn? What can we do differently? What can we do better? What can we improve in order to stop this from happening? How do we stop it? I learned that even with faith, God does not change life, He changes us. There is something that God wants us to learn from this. And if we don't get these lessons, again, we got to get them so that this can stop. Here is another powerful quote about grief. Grief never ends, but it changes. It's a passage, not a place. Grief is not a sign of weakness nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. It is the price of love. A young man has been lost. His family has been changed forever. The city, the state, the nation, and even the world. And it hurts. But we must use this hurt to find a way to help those in the future. We must use this pain for a purpose. We must figure out how to take this mess and transform it into a message. Number one, before I end this episode, you must never forget your history. That is history not just for the country, but your personal history. History is powerful because if you want to know what a person is going to do in the future, all you have to do is never forget what they have done in the past. Again, social scientists teach us that behavior is predictable. It's not 100%. You always have anomalies. You always have exceptions to the rule. But the reason why most people don't change because it's very hard to change. There's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort and energy that has to go into changing and evolving for the better. To live elevated living and to share power and to share resources, you have to be on a very high spiritual level. And unfortunately, most people are not. And so we got to remember that history. We can't live in la la land and then let something tragic happen to remind you that you are black. You forgot. I don't know how, but don't forget that. Again, and this is what makes it so complex. You have to teach your children how to get along with everyone. That's important because, in the spaces that I am in, I interact with people of different walks of life. For the most part, on my job, most of the people come from my community. However, there are other people there, and I want to be able to work with them. And I try to deal with people based on character, not on race, not on culture, not on religion, but I try to deal with people as individuals and not judge a whole group by evil deeds of some. Unfortunately, when people have a long history of doing things, evil things, when a big majority, a group of people have a history of doing things that are dark, I can't help to wonder and distinguish who's who. I don't have time for that because I could lose my life trying to do that. So again, we got to teach our children to be aware of that and what to do in situations like this, and it's after the fact, but I do wonder, what could he have done? Because apparently there's a video or some recording where he's saying, give me my effing phone. They had his keys, they had his phone, and these were not things that they voluntarily surrendered. These are things that Nolan's parents had to go get. And that says a lot. And I think, I don't want you to forget this. Don't forget this. People colluded. People conspired together in the name of evil to stop the truth from coming out. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Yes, in an ideal world, we can all get along and we can love and we can sing together, eat together. Ooh, that's an ideal. But the reality is that you cannot do that and not be putting your life at risk. And that's unfortunate. That is really unfortunate. And that's what those people forgot. There's a judge that has done a long video. It's about 30 something minutes long. I watch it. I followed him on Facebook because I just want to know if he could give some more insight. But he gave a legal perspective of some things, I guess, that should have happened or could have happened as a result of this case. It was very insightful, learned a lot. But he was saying that Mississippi is not a safe place. Now, I know some people from Mississippi, and they don't want to leave Mississippi. Apparently people don't want to leave. And they were saying that Mississippi is a beautiful place. But this man was basically saying he was a judge for 6 years. It wasn't safe. He moved out. And we do know that there's been a long, dark history there. And I can just talk about it because my daughter and I, we've had a lot of conversations about Mississippi. But that's another story. But nevertheless, he left. And so he talked about there's still a lot of problems there. And I know from keeping up with the news that there have been some very dark and dangerous situations. I want to end with this. I do still believe in spiritual power. I do believe in prayer. I do believe that when people petition God about certain things, that God does answer. If the people who he has made, who he has created, if they would call on him, and they would heal themselves, because the issue with us is that, and this is what makes it so hard, we're fighting our own people, and then we're fighting an outside enemy. When you have to fight among your own selves, when you have a civil war and then you got another enemy on the outside, it's exhausting. And it's hard to progress. It's hard to make changes, not just as individuals, because that's happening, but make changes collectively as a group, because there is power when we work and operate together for a common good. And we may not all agree with every little intricate detail, but that's why we have made progress. I will say this, I shared that I had a business in a mall, and because of that, I met a lot of people. I met people from all over the world, different walks of life, religions, races, belief systems, everything. And that's how I ended up starting Bad Thought Therapy, because I learned that there were so many people hurting, bleeding, having just emotionally and spiritually bleeding. And I wanted to just give a message of hope. And so I learned, though, that most people gave up on believing in a higher power because of religion. They could not distinguish the difference between religion and relationship. But that's what I want to end with. We got to go back to talking to God and praying. And I know many of us are praying, and we see already God is uncovering. He's uncovering the darkness. And we have to continue to pray for justice. We have to continue to pray for wisdom. Wisdom, wisdom, wisdom. You got to use wisdom. And you have to, you got to focus on what is real and what you see and not what you want to see. Because some people are confused, and that's how they ended up where they are right now. We got to pray for the parents, those who were closest to Nolan. His parents, he has siblings, he has an extended family. We have to continue to pray for their strength, for God to comfort them, for God to give them peace and healing. It's unimaginable to think, I saw my child one day, and the next day, I not only see them, but I don't know what happened to them. And then I find out that they're no longer here. And that people actually colluded together. They coordinated a plan to try to hide the evil. It's got to be painful in an excruciating kind of way. And you know what? Pray for the parents. They've been doing some interviews and things. If I were an advisor, I would tell them not to do another public interview. That right now they need to come together as a family. And they need to, the parents, they have other children. And they need to focus on them. They've already made it known. They want answers. Of course, they want answers. They deserve answers. They already want to know what happened. They've already shared that now. We want to know too. And they should know. They got to know. That not knowing, I'm sure that could just eat away at a person. But they need to rest. They need to pause. They need to come together. They need to strategize. Because it's about to get more intense. I can tell you that right now. Because the darkness is not going to be able to be hidden much longer. God has heard. He's heard the cries. He's heard the prayers. He's heard the wailing. And he is going to answer. And he's going to answer in a mighty way. In a way that you've never seen before. There's a time when you kill, that old saying, you kill a mockingbird. There are people, when you take out certain people, when you take out the innocent, and you take out the good ones, that's when you really get God's wrath. And I don't normally talk like this, but this is a case where I feel like that's about to come on. Y'all continue to pray. Pray, and I know I know this is hard, but you're going to have to pray for your enemies too. You're going to have to pray that they heal, that whatever, if it's evil, if it's some kind of disease or whatever, what's going on, pray that they get healed. Because if they don't, whatever force is causing this evil, this long, long history of evil, it's just going to continue. And so let me end with that. Again, I hope and pray that you're well. And I know that we're all looking at this case. I know I woke up thinking, Lord, please let a new development come out so we can see what happened to this young man. And I know we're all a little anxious, wanting to know what the details are going to reveal. But we've got to also pray for peace. And I hope that you are peaceful. And I hope that you also get the lessons from this. Because every time something like this happens, God is trying to tell us something. Yes, the enemy is working, but God is trying to tell us something. Well, thank you for listening and learning with Bad Thought Therapy. I am Sheree Hardy, and I hope that you were inspired or empowered in some way by this video. If it helped you, don't forget to like it, and it only takes a few seconds to subscribe to my channel. Take care. Peace and blessings.